Hi everyone, I'm Shengyuan, and today I'll be making this presentation regarding on the diversity in peace education, pedagogy, games, and museums. In this presentation, I'll be using an interdisciplinary approach and sharing some of my opinion and the opinion of the authors and literature I provided to the Peace Library regarding on the interdisciplinary method study on peace education and its impact. Here are the 5 items that I contributed to the Peace Library this semester. The first one is from wargaming to peace gaming, digital simulations with peacekeeper roles needed. This one is discussing the concept of peace gaming and wargaming. The author is trying to distinguish them from each other by making the argument that the peace gaming should be more and more used by the UN to train their peacekeepers. And the second article here is learning about conflict and negotiations through computer simulations, the case of peacemaker. So, build on the first article, this article shows a very precise example of the peace game, which is peacemaker, and they're trying to make the point that the peacemaker, which is the computer game that based on the context of the conflict between the Israel and Palestine, this game actually helps the people from Palestine and from Israel to reach the mutual understanding. Interestingly, the third article also talked about the same conflict, which is the ethnography of peace education, some lessons learned from the Palestinian Jewish integrated education in Israel. And in this article, the author was sharing about their experience on how the bilingual education is important to reach the, the recovery from the conflict. The last article here, Schooling for Violence and Peace. How does peace education differ from normal schooling? In this article, they also share their opinion about other formats of the peace education. Instead of talking about the role of the peace narrative in peace education, they focus more on how to established to create a peaceful atmosphere in classroom and the role of the teaching staff. The last item here is um, actually a podcast which entitled Peace Education in Central Asia, a public health intervention. It is a podcast by a member of NGO in talking about how the concept of peace museum can be used in terms of the peace education. And I intentionally put this entry here because it can help us to help the visitors to visit the Peace Library and Peace Museum at the same time, which can help them to learn how peace can be visualized in different formats. Okay, let's start. And firstly, to start with, something I found very interesting is there's a missing discussion in the Peace Library that is talk about the peace gaming. And obviously, the peace gaming are more and more used by the organization and by the government. So I think I need to contribute to our Peace Library in providing more discussion on that. And to start with, uh, the authors of the first essay was trying to distinguish peace gaming from the war gaming, and according to their opinion, war gaming is trying to make a binary distinction over the good people and the bad people. And as a player, you have to choose from one of the sides and to defeat the other side. However, the aim of the peace gaming is to create a mutual understanding on different sides, so you don't necessarily need to defeat the other side. That's the basic difference between the two concepts. And in terms of the impact of the peace gaming, so the first use of it is to have peace gaming in the UN for the United Nations to train their peacekeepers. According to the second article, basically the UN believe that the peace gaming can train the soft skills of the peacekeepers, which can make them to have more communication skills and to improve their adaptability in different cultural contexts. And the second part is talk about the peace gaming in reaching mutual understanding in the context of the conflict between Palestinian people and Jewish people. Uh, According to the research, when they're trying to play the game Peacemaker, they can simulate uh, the action of the government from the other side, which can help them to make reflection on the conflict, on the local conflict, and which can help them to have reflection on their own identity, I think. As I mentioned, not many entries in the Peace Library is talking about the Peace Gaming. However, there are some connections with other entries in the library. The first one, let's talk about the Peace Education International Trend. So, from my perspective, when the visitor visit our library, they saw the entries on the local level peace education, and afterwards they can shift to the international level on peace education through the hyperlink, which can help them to solidify their understanding about the peace education through the multimedia platform. And the second essay focused more on the role of the peacekeeping army in the peace building process. So for the visitors, uh, they can have a reflection on how the UN should improve their effectiveness in the peace building process. As I mentioned, two articles in the list have been contributing on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and they are narrating this conflict from two perspectives. The one is the peacekeeping perspective, and the other one is the bilingual education perspective, and they share some similarities. Firstly, both target group is for students. For the peace gaming project, they're trying to target on the students in the university to let them to try the peacemaker and to observe their impact. And for the bilingual education part, the the researchers is trying to observe how the bilingual education reshapes the conflict between the students from different ethnicity and or religious group. And according to both articles, their observation are quite identical. Is the peace education include peace gaming and bilingual education improve their ability on mutual understanding, and this would be helpful for students to think about the issue from the side of the other government, of the other parties in the conflict, which can help them to have a reflection on their identity as well. And as a result, this creates the resilience from the conflict. As I mentioned, two articles talk about the peace pedagogies, and I want to make a comparison between them and to share some of my opinions about the peace pedagogy in different disciplines. So, as you may know, the traditional approach is to having the peace narrative in IR instead of the war narrative, and this can talk more to students about the importance of peace studies. And on the other hand, according to the entries that I provide to the library this time, they have more reflection on the intention of creating peaceful classroom from the education studies perspective. And they're sharing the point that for the teaching staff, when they saw the student have conflict between each other, they shouldn't be punishing them immediately. They should let them to reflect, to observe the conflict, and to understand why the conflict can happen and how we can recover from the conflict, or how we can find the solution for the conflict. And this is trying to integrate the nature of the war and peace in the real classroom, and to make a student to reflect on their behaviors in order to improve the peaceful classroom. And according to my opinion, personally, I think the educational studies reflection on the peaceful classroom is actually very citizen scholarship approach, because they're trying to build a bridge from the academic studies to the real life scenarios. And I also found two other entries in our library. The first one is reclaiming peace in international relations, and for this article, it used the peace story approach in the IR in the peace education. And the second one, a gender perspective on peace education, the work for peace. And in this one, it shares some similarities with the article that I provide to the library. Is that nowadays the normal schooling is creating more sexist, or more bullying perspective in sometimes for students, and they didn't have enough reflection on the potential conflict between students. And when they grow up, this can reshape their understanding of peace and conflict. By using the approach of the educational studies, the teaching staff they have very important responsibility in the peacemaking in classroom, and this means that they should allow students to reflect on their behaviors and they should encourage them to do so, which is aimed to create the peace building in classroom. And let's begin for the last entry that I make, which is about the peace education in Rwanda. As I mentioned, I intentionally put this entry here because it creates a link between three concepts here, which are peace museum, peace education, and conflict recovery. And as I mentioned, the peace museum here is the place for the peace education. And by having those students in the Peace Museum, they can have the peace education, learning the history, learning the peace narrative. And by doing that, they are actually encouraging the students to have the community engagement project, which helped the whole community to have the recovery from the conflict. And the reason I put this podcast here is not only to link our Peace Museum project with the Peace Library project, but also, very importantly, I think it's another point for the citizen scholarship, as actually there are a lot amount of the studies regarding on the Peace Museum and peace education, but this podcast has built the bridge that help the scholars to understand how the theory can be implemented in the real life scenario. And for the end of the presentation, I want to call for more podcast entries in our Peace Library because there is some differences between the podcast and journal articles. For instance, the audience difference. The podcasts are designed more to be towards general public, and this makes it very easy to understand. And the journal article sometimes they have the theoretical part and also the methodology part, and those part a little bit difficult to understand for the non-specialist audience. And in terms of the format, some podcasts they are having the Q&A session, so basically you can understand the question from the others they raise to the researchers, and obviously we can learn from the perspectives of others on how they narrate the issue. And sometimes this question can solve the issue we have in our mind as well. And the third thing is the content. And I think the podcast is a more direct way in approaching the issue because they come very directly in showing, okay, what did we do and what we will do next. Compared with the journal article, that is a better way or more direct way in showing some of the project in the real life as part of our citizen scholarship attempt. So, as a result, I really want to call for more podcast contribution in our Peace Library. I think it will improve diversity and to make our Visualizing Peace Library a better place. Thanks a lot for your listening. This is all for my presentation. Hope you have a nice day.